Hello, everyone, and happy holiday season. It is I, the anonymous voiceover artist who Jack paid to do voiceover work for this holiday episode. I'm in an undisclosed location enjoying my hot cocoa brandy. Oh, that's good stuff. Jack decided to do something a little bit different this holiday season. So he hired me to do a little bit of this feely goodness. So without further ado, let's see what he's up to, shall we? This is Jackknives Holiday Special.
Happy holidays, everyone. This year I felt like I'd do something a little bit different. You see, I've been really reflecting this past year and thinking about anything and everything that I could to be kind of in a more happy, vibrant spirit. It hasn't worked, but I've tried. And so it got me thinking. I pondered here with Ein, really thought about it, and I thought, why not somewhat embrace the darkness? Use that darkness as a power source, along with the light that is within. So, because of that, I felt the only way I could properly end this year is by looking at 10 dark holiday movies. Now, these movies may not necessarily be for everyone. In fact, the rating scale is essentially a watch at your own risk. The higher the rating, the more I feel that it's open for more people to watch. The lower, you take it at your own risk. And no, Nightmare Before Christmas is not on this list. Despite the fact that it does have very dark themes, it is still majority a kids movie. The movies on this list, not so much. Somewhat, but not so much. With that out of the way, these are my 10 dark holiday movies.
Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale.
In the Finnish mountains, an expedition crew forced to adhere to strict rules of no cursing, smoking, or negative things, excavate and find a deep secret. A young boy named Pietari discovers the secret along with his father, with horrifying consequences, turning their entire idea of what the holiday means on its head. I was recommended this movie years ago, and over the years I've tried rewatching it. And the more I do, the more I start thinking, maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's a thing that it's a funny, dark, morbid sense of humor. Because as cultures change, there is different interpretations of what comedy or what kind of nudge and wink style of humor there are. With this movie, though, it plays it very, very seriously. The concept of what if Santa isn't Santa, but he's Santa. It's hard to explain without giving anything away, but essentially it's a crazy businessman who wants to finance the concept of there is a real Santa Claus. You need to follow specific guidelines, rules, and obligations to keep him around, kind of like a spell, and he wants to, I guess, greedily take control of Santa. And it's also centered around this boy and his father's struggle to get along for the holidays in a very tumultuous family relationship. Happy holidays. But it's so much grittier and darker, and yet it's so vibrant. Like, it goes from this juxtaposition of serious, it's dark, to having some lightheartedness, but not too much. It's mostly dark. Also, there's a lot of old guy junk, so maybe don't watch this one with your kids. In fact, keep this as a warning for some of these movies shouldn't be watched with families, ever. Take that as you will. In the town of Little Haven, England, Anna Shepherd deals with the pressures of her social life and the pressures of the holidays. Unknown to them, the world has been thrown into chaos as the dead have risen and started eating the flesh of the living. Anna and her friends have to come face to face fighting off zombies, all while singing and dancing and trying to survive. What happens if you take a low-budget movie inspired by Shaun of the Dead, still in England, and some of the elements of Shaun of the Dead, but you make it a holiday musical? You get Anna and the Apocalypse. The music's actually not bad. It's not anything great, but the comedy is balanced pretty damn well. It has a really fun sense of self-awareness. Like, they know what kind of movie they made. They know this is not a movie you should take seriously. And the effects range from actually pretty damn good practical effects to just over-the-top, terrible CGI. And it's kind of funny in that way because you don't really take it too seriously. Hell, Anna actually, I think, kills a couple people with a giant candy cane styrofoam ornament. So it's the same kind of thing where it's like you take a little bit of teen comedy with some zombie stuff, and it's fun. It's weird to say a zombie movie in the holidays is fun, but it is. It's stupid. It's dorky. It's weird. Or like a clean, just C movie that you could just pop in and just eat popcorn, maybe get high and just watch something stupid. It's so funny how weird it is. It's not really one that many people have ever talked about, but I think it just flew so hard under the radar and it just buried itself. And the cast is actually pretty good. The main actress who plays Anna is also herself pretty good. Decent singer. She's got a lot of vibrancy. Some of the other cast members can range from pretty good to not so great. But it has a lot of charm to it. And I think that's kind of what it left me with. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was there and gone, and it didn't do too much, but it did just the right amount.
Black Christmas.
The sorority of Pi Kappa Sigma is stalked and harassed by an unknown caller. This caller, saying vulgar, disgusting, and horrifying things, slowly kills them one by one, in graphic fashion, all in the backdrop of the enclosed, snowy holiday. 1974's Black Christmas is considered by many, including me, as a focal point on how to do a slasher proper. There's so many elements about this that just creep you out. Namely that of the mysterious killer. You never really get to see what he looks like. You only hear his voice, his disturbing phone calls to the girls in the sorority house, knowing that the killer's hiding in any room, and the fact that he's just haunting them, saying horrible, disgusting things to them, and he's just picking them off one by one. It's literally like being locked inside a cage with an animal. And we, the audience, are just so engaged by what's going to happen next. Like, who's next? Who's going to be picked off? Will any of them survive? The atmosphere, the disturbing nature of the movie. And the kills are actually really unique, especially for the time. The famous bag scene is literally on the cover of the poster. It's so iconic in that it pushed an envelope and a boundary that had never really gone to that extreme before. And it still holds up fairly well. The movie has had 2 horrible attempts at a remake, and neither of them are any good. But if you stick to the original movie, it actually still really holds up if you are a huge fan of slasher films or horror films in general and want to see a really, really well done one. The underrated, as always, Olivia Hussey just steal the show with this production. And it is weird to me to this day that the same guy who made Black Christmas would later be the same guy who went on to create A Christmas Story. It's just odd how the way of the world is, isn't it?
Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2.
Ricky Caldwell, a deranged serial killer, tells his therapist the story of his brother Billy's rampage, eventually leading to his own fall into madness, all centered around their past traumas and their hatred for the holidays. This movie is infamous. Everyone from everywhere that's a horror slasher fan has seen this movie or seen bits of this movie. It is the room of horror. It is so badly acted, and yet beautifully badly acted. The reason I chose this one instead of the original is because the original doesn't really have any somber moments. It's just dark, just pure darkness. It feels like there's no positivity in it. It's just sad and dark. But this movie is saved by one person, Eric Freeman, who plays Ricky, the brother of the original killer. And the reason I recommend also watching this movie is because you don't need to watch the first movie in order to watch this movie, as half of it is literally just recapping the movie. Even the parts where the killer is a baby, and it has one of the funniest lines where it's like, how could you possibly know that? It's like, because I was there. And it's like, technically, he's not wrong. And it's so hilariously bad. Once you get past all of the elements of the first movie, it becomes this hilariously dark comedy. And the best part, you can watch it either on holidays or on
Garbage Day! Huh? No!
17-year-old Ashley has to babysit 12-year-old Luke on Christmas Eve. They're suddenly thrust into danger with someone breaking in to go after them. Trying to survive the holidays, Ashley realizes not everything is as it seems. What happens when you take Home Alone and you make it horror? No, not that, no. You get this movie. What makes it so interesting is the cast actually has some pretty damn good chemistry. The feelings of intensity, the drama, the relatability to some of the cast. Granted, of course, it's not as good as Home Alone. But it is interesting to take a concept like Home Alone and kind of turn it on its head and just kind of go 100% with it. I kind of like that. And I think that adds some interesting elements to it that, I don't know, maybe I just was expecting something a little more on the darker side. But it has just enough right, I think, to stand out on its own. Now, it's obviously not going to be as good as Black Christmas or Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. But it does have just enough charm and real, pretty intense moments to stand out and allow it to thrive on its own. It's very much fly-by-night, as most people haven't really said or heard much about this movie. So it's still fairly quiet enough to allow people to make their own interpretations of how the movie is. I personally like to think it's just a fun, dark horror slasher, but it has just enough charm to kind of allow it to be its own thing. Max, a young boy who just wishes for his toxic family to get along for the holidays, writes a letter to Santa, only to be mocked by his family ripping it up in anger. This brings about an ancient evil spirit from years gone by who will teach their family the true meaning of coming together, even if it's through suffering. I freaking love this movie. Everything Michael Dougherty has done, I have absolutely adored. Trick or Treat, Godzilla King of Monsters, and of course, this. This movie has become iconic in its own way, in the same way that Trick or Treat did, organically allowing the audience to just enjoy it, make it its own thing, and allow it to thrive and survive within itself. It also falls in the same boundary as Nightmare Before Christmas, balancing between a Halloween and a Christmas movie. Although, whereas that one is an animated movie, this one is a horror movie. But the horror is actually not as bad as it is the drama. The family dynamic is far scarier and darker than the actual monsters. This family truly does hate each other, and it's obvious that the boy is just so desperate to make them get along. And it's kind of heart-wrenching in a way, but it's also satisfying in a way. It leaves you with this sense of uncertainty, but some sort of optimism for the future. Kind of similar to after you have a rough holiday with the family. Similar to having situations of people you don't get along with. It leaves you with a hopeful optimism for the future, but never really giving you any clarity for that, allowing it to be left to interpretation, just like the good old Krampus intended. It also has just enough throwbacks to other dark holiday movies that it just brings out just some nice little Easter eggs. The cast is fun and dark and gritty and just overall assholes to the point where you're just like, ugh, you can't stand these people and you kind of want to see them get their comeuppance, but you're also kind of rooting for them in the end. And ultimately, isn't that what the holidays are really about?
Get Scrooged.
Frank Cross is a cynical, power-hungry television executive tasked with creating the greatest presentation of A Christmas Carol live, which he decides to make violent and sexual. After he fires an employee on Christmas Eve just for the thrill of it, his life parallels to that of A Christmas Carol, as he sees the ghosts of past, present, and future to get him to try to understand what it means to be a good person. Christmas Carol is considered by many to be one of the greatest written works of fiction. It's had multiple iterations and multiple interpretations. My personal favorite is probably A Muppet Christmas Carol. But this is one of the only times they've tried doing a somewhat modern remake of it, and it actually works. It has such dark grittiness to it. Hell, when you see Frank Cross go through what he goes through, you see a guy who's been corrupted by his own decisions, by his own vices, in the same way that Ebenezer Scrooge did. But his is a little bit more on the practical side, as many have had to make hard, harsh decisions that affected their personal life, affected their well-being, been brought up in rough childhoods, and took it out on others. And I think overall, it's just hard to watch some of the stuff, but it's necessary, as it shows this kind of vulnerability to him. And also, it's just overall hilarious. It is so funny how dark it gets, but it's also just such a dorky, weird comedy. I liked seeing this whole aspect of a guy who worked his way up to the top of a giant TV studio and literally worked from nothing and came into becoming a CEO, and what that sacrifice cost him. His personal life, even the people that helped him get to where he is. It all just culminates in a way that feels like, yeah, that's kind of accurate. Also, I love the different ways they simultaneously keep the same elements, but don't feel forced. Of Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim are two separate from each other. What I also find really interesting is they take characters and morph them into their own thing, and yet it feels natural the way they progressed. To see a guy who was so loyal to him, like a Bob Cratchit, just get canned and his life falling apart and going to hell, and him just like literally going ballistic against him. It's like, yeah, that's justified. That's 100% justified. We see what he's gone through and go, yeah, we get it, man. We totally get it. Right on, man. But we're also kind of rooting for Frank Cross in that same way. Each ghost is something different. The ghost of Christmas Past is a cabbie from New York who's constantly chain smoking. For the longest time, I thought his character was the same skeleton cabbie from Ghostbusters. Maybe I'm wrong here, but have at it, film theorists. Ghost of Christmas Present was this fairy who's on a string, but she actually can fly, but she's just constantly kicking him in the nuts and just literally, she is literally a ball breaker. And I love that because it's just like seeing how mean and vicious Frank Cross is, you kind of, yeah, he deserves it. And the fact that they made his love life a focal point when a lot of interpretations of the Christmas Carol kind of just sway over that part when it's such a vital part of the character as to why Ebenezer Scrooge is so cold. Also, the Tiny Tim proxy having become a mute and traumatized from seeing his sibling in a drive-by, and he's purely traumatized and he can't talk. Like, whoa, that's real. That's real stuff. Like, that's heavy stuff, especially for the 80s. That's stuff they never talked about. Before I spend another 10 minutes talking about this movie, let's go on to the next picture. An alcoholic and bittersweet Santa Claus feels defeated with the holidays becoming more about things than love. At the same time, a rich family in a mansion decides to spend the holidays together with a mercenary group holding them hostage for their wealth on Christmas. Trudy, the smallest girl with the sweetest heart in the family, wishes with all of her might for Santa to come help and save them. Now Santa must remember his true warrior origins and save this family from impossible odds with a little bit of magic and a lot of rage. I did a full review of this movie, and still one of my favorite dark holiday movies because I feel that it has the right balance. And it's very rare, especially newer movies, to be able to balance it proper. The darkness with the light. And I feel that this one does it so damn well that it just feels like, yeah, like, I mean, it's Hopper. It's freaking seeing Hopper from Stranger Things as Santa whooping everybody's ass, and especially these like criminals who are like a SWAT team, all in an attempt to just save a little girl. Like that's just badass. It's just awesome, gritty, gory, bloody, fun. I know that's a weird combo, but it is. It feels fun and dark and a movie that you just pump your fist at, like, yeah, get him, yeah. It feels like kind of like Die Hard in that way, I think, but this goes way heavier on the actual holiday elements of it. I mean, hell, it's literally Santa. There's parts where he full on like fights people with a sledgehammer, he uses toys, and it's also just a great, dark, funny, morbid movie, but not too morbid. Comedy that has this great action to it. And it doesn't feel like... It also doesn't really make any sense with John Leguizamo's character. This guy who's doing this thing to this, oh no, he's actually crazy. Okay. All right. Like that just kind of came out of nowhere. And it just kind of made me laugh because you're just like near the halfway point of the movie. You're like, oh, okay. I guess that's a motivation. Sure. All right. It's just so fun. It just made me laugh. It really made me happy to watch this and laugh and just, just turn it on and just enjoy myself. Just have a blast and just be like, what the hell is this movie? It's so funny.
Steven Spielberg presents Gremlins.
An inventor father gifts his son Billy with a mysterious creature called a mogwai for Christmas, who he names Gizmo. There are 3 rules that he must follow, but slowly, one by one, each rule is broken, unleashing chaos and multiplying the gremlins, taking over the town and bringing holiday fear wherever they go. How could I not put this movie in this list? I mean, it came out 40 years ago this year, and it's still a great movie. It still holds up, and it's still dark. I mean, surprisingly. The first movie, it has this great blend of comedy and darkness, and people that go, oh, it's not a horror movie. I'm like, no, it is. It's just not like a horror movie, but it's got enough horror elements to be a horror movie. I mean, there's a part where the gremlin explodes in a microwave. There's an old lady who justifiably gets launched in the air and shot to hell. There's so much funniness in this. But I think what makes me laugh so hard is there are parts in the movie that it's trying to be so serious and you just laugh at it because you go, like, it's so out of nowhere. Like, it's like a whiplash. One of my favorite parts in it just came out of nowhere was there's a part where there's a science teacher who wants to watch after Gizmo. And you're like, oh, okay. And then Gizmo gets out of his cage, and the scientist just randomly gets a syringe of poison. And he's like, hey. I'm like, dude, you're a science teacher. First of all, what are you doing? Like, what the hell are you doing? And it's just so weird. It's like Phoebe Cates does this line and this monologue about how the reason she stopped believing in Santa Claus, and you're just like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? This is so weird. And the climax is just awesomely cheesy and goofy. I mean, it's in a toy store, for crap's sakes. How many horror movies or dark movies, maybe aside from in the Chucky franchise, have you ever seen that the ending take place at a toy store? It's just, it's funny, it's wacky, it's dark, it's bizarre. The second movie, along with a lot of 80s sequels, leaned a lot more towards the kid-friendly element, but this movie does not shy away from not holding back on certain things. Bless them for it, because we get to enjoy this holiday classic. For me, there's only one dark holiday movie, and it may be an unconventional movie that many people may not even consider a holiday movie. But trust me, it definitely is. Oswald Cobblepot, a deformed man abandoned as a baby, wants to get revenge on the world that has scorned him, as does Selina Kyle for being killed for trying to expose corruption in Gotham. It's up to Batman to stop the holiday chaos and save Gotham. Now hold on, before everyone freaks out like, really? This movie? Batman Returns? Really? If you were to say that this is not a holiday movie, you would then say that Die Hard is not a holiday movie. You would then say that half of the movies that you constantly say are, well, it's technically a holiday movie. How is this not a holiday movie? It takes place on Christmas time. It constantly has themes around Christmas. They literally make monologue about Christmas. It's all Christmas. It's dark. It's gritty. It's fun. It's a Batman movie that's centered around Christmas, but it doesn't make, he's not going after snowmen. It's so good the way they did it. I love this movie so much. It's a sequel to one of my favorite movies of all time, and I love it just as much as I love that movie. Hell, this movie got Tim Burton fired because it was too dark, and it was mainly to do with the tie-in they were going to have with McDonald's. But it's like, did you guys see the first movie? I mean, it was dark as hell, but I know you wanted to market it towards kids, but it was a rated R movie. And yeah, it was going to be dark too. I love the themes. I love the elements. I love the feel of this movie. It feels like Christmas. It feels like there's a brightness within that darkness. There's a light that glows from all of it. Even in the darkest parts of it, there's some hope. There's some brightness to it. I mean, Batman coming to save all the children of Gotham, and Penguin wanting originally just to find his parents, only to realize that it never really mattered in the end, and it was all about getting power and destroying the city. Him not really sure of who he was and trying to figure out who he was and where he fit in and if he fit in, and it's really sad. And Selina slowly going madder and madder and madder, but then meeting Bruce and wanting to find this hopefulness, this chance for a future. And Bruce seeing that future within her too. The moment they realize at the party where they're dancing, from the same dialogue that they said when they fought each other, it was this heartfelt shattering that when I see it every time, it just gut punches me, because it's like, like everything was going so well, and it just felt like little things throughout the movie. I mean, hell, even the fact that they go to the masquerade party and they're the only two who aren't wearing masks, because this is their mask. Like little subtle things that Burton got so damn well in this movie that I loved about this movie. And I love Michael Keaton's Batman, and I love Michelle Pfeiffer, and I love Danny DeVito. I love this entire cast, even Christopher Walken going ham as hell, and yet just as creepy and dark at the same time. It was so good. It's such a great movie. It's one of those movies that it doesn't have to be a holiday movie, but it should be a holiday movie. And maybe look at it through that lens, and you might see something a little different than what you expected. Well, that does it for this year's Jackknives Reviews. I've had quite a hectic year, to say the least. I've had some very dark lows, but some very high ups, getting to meet some people I've always wanted to meet, and getting to work with some new people, hopefully some new fans along the way. And here's hoping that the future is a little bit better than it is. Because we can always hope for a better future, and we can always make a little bit better for each other. As for me, I'm going to stick with Ein here and maybe watch some more fun movies, check out some new stuff, enjoy myself, and overall, just try to stay positive and try to look for goodness within the dark. And as long as we all stay hopeful, and as long as we have each other, we'll all be alright. Have a happy holiday, and I'll see you next time.
Wasn't that a hoot, kids? Getting to hear some fun, disturbing movie titles and descriptions? It wasn't redundant and overused at all in this time of year. Well, I hope you have a good holiday season. Meanwhile, I'm going to enjoy this nice crackling fire and alcoholic beverage to my heart's content.
Hey!
Oh, shit!
How the hell did you get in my house?
Gotta go, kids!